Hello, I'm Esther Githu-Yuat. It's Thursday, October 6th. This is Africa 54.
A new study reveals alarming rates of infant and maternal mortality in Ethiopia's embattled Tigray region. Burkina Faso coup leader Captain Ibrahim Traore is appointed as president as the United States warns the junta of the risks of allying with Russia. And Amazon founder Jeff Bezos seeks to fund initiatives that would reverse deforestation and land degradation on around 250 million acres of land in Africa by 2030.
We begin our broadcast in Ethiopia, where, according to a new study, babies in the embattled Tigray region are dying in their first month of life at 4 times the rate before the war cut off access to most medical care for over 5 million people. Hondiho has more.
Women are dying during pregnancy or within 42 days of giving birth at 5 times the rate before the war. And children under 5 are dying at twice the rate, often because of easily preventable reasons, according to the yet published study shared by its authors with the Associated Press. Almost 2 years have passed since the war started, and Ethiopia's government has isolated the Tigray region from the rest of the world, severing essential services such as electricity, phones, internet, and banking.
So we can say that the under-5 mortality during wartime doubled compared to the PreWar era. Neonatal mortality means days of a child or a neonate in the first 28 days of life also quadrupled as compared to the pre-war era, from around 10, according to studies from Tigray in 2020, to around 36.
A ceasefire in the war earlier this year allowed thousands of trucks of humanitarian aid into Tigray. Still, it renewed fighting in August and has stopped deliveries to the region, where critical medical supplies like insulin and childhood vaccines have run out. There is an extreme shortage of medicines and equipment, the UN-backed investigators found. Pregnant women and young children, least to blame for the fighting, are among the most vulnerable. Local health authorities conducted the new study in May and June with financial support from 2 UN agencies. They studied more than 189,000 households in 6 of the regions, 7 zones via cluster sampling. Maternal mortality was at 840 deaths per 100,000 live births, up from a low 186 before the war. More than 80% of mothers died outside of a health facility, another stark contrast to the study. More than 90% of mothers in Tigray before the war had prenatal care, and more than 70 benefited from skilled delivery, according to an analysis published in the BMJ Global Health Journal last year. That's a 4-fold increase from pre-war levels, and more than half of the deaths occurred at home without medical intervention. The most common causes were premature infections or the inability to establish breathing at birth. Vaccine-preventable diseases like diarrhea, pneumonia accounted for majority of the cases, the study says. The study calls for more medical supplies, including painkillers, antibiotics, vaccines, IV fluids, and drugs to induce labor after fatal death. Meanwhile, Ethiopia's government has accepted an invitation by the African Union to participate in peace talks aimed at ending a 2-year conflict with rival Tigray forces. The talks would be the first formal negotiations between the two sides since the outbreak of the war in November 2020. Both sides had previously said they were prepared to participate in the AU-mediated talks, but intense fighting has continued to rage across Tigray. Paul Ndio, VOA News, Washington.
Coup leader Captain Ibrahim Traore was appointed as president of Burkina Faso on Wednesday, according to an official statement. The impoverished Sahel nation plunged into turmoil at the weekend when Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Sandaogo Damiba, who had seized power in January, was toppled by newly emerged rival Traore, who headed a faction of disgruntled junior officers. Delegates from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, wrapped up a fact-finding mission Tuesday and held meetings with religious and traditional leaders and Traore. Traore's appointment as head of state was announced in an official statement read out on national television by spokesman Captain Kiswesida Farouk Azaria Sogo.
Le mouvement patriotique pour la sauvegarde et la restauration est composé ainsi qu'il suit.
The Patriotic Movement for Safeguarding and Restoration, MPSR, is composed as follows: a president, a first vice president, a second vice president, a coordinator, and 2 committees. The president of the Patriotic Movement for Safeguarding and Restoration, MPSR, is the guarantor of national independence, territorial integrity, permanence and continuity of the state, and respect for international treaties and agreements at which Burkina Faso is a party. It sets the broad guidelines of state policy, has regulatory powers, and can legislate by ordinance. The Basic Act shall be published in the Official Gazette of Faso, Ouagadougou, 5th October 2022. Captain Ibrahim Traore, President of the Patriotic Movement for Safeguarding and Restoration, Head of State.
The United States has warned the junta of the risks of allying with Russia, saying they condemned any attempt to exacerbate the current situation in Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso's September 30 coup saw civilians and troops take to the streets with Russian flags, saying they wanted the country's security partnership with France replaced by one with Russia. In this report from Ouagadougou, Henry Wilkins looks into how Russian disinformation played a part in the country's second coup in 8 months.
On Sunday, 2 days after Burkina Faso's new junta leader, Ibrahim Traore, announced on national television that the leader of the previous coup had been ousted, one of his soldiers emerged from an apparently stolen armoured UN vehicle waving a Russian flag. The streets of Ouagadougou were chaotic. Outside the French embassy, protesters waved Russian flags too.
Russia will help us because of the bloodshed and suffering of our military, because of some politicians who only offer bad governance. We want Russia.
At the embassy, they pull down razor wire and throw burning projectiles over its walls. French forces inside retaliate with tear gas and a volley of warning shots. The protesters run for cover. France has partnered with Burkina Faso in its nearly 7-year war with Islamic State and Al-Qaeda-linked militants. But anti-French sentiment is rising. Many now think Russia is better suited to solving Burkina Faso's security problems. Evgeny Prigozhin, founder of the controversial Wagner paramilitary group, has expressed support for the new junta leader. According to the AFP news agency, Prigozhin said Traore and his men have done what was necessary for the good of the people. Ismail Sawadogo, who runs a shop in Ouagadougou's suburbs, supports Russian intervention.
Russia has weapons and also a vision that will help Africa. That's why we want them to come here to help us in our fight. What Russia is doing in Mali is good, and we know that will be okay. Yes, security in Mali has improved.
Asked where he got his Russian flag and clothes in Russian colours, he said he bought the cloth and had a tailor make them. Konstantin Guvi, an analyst with Clingendale Institute, a Dutch think tank, spoke to VOA about how Russian intervention and propaganda in neighbouring Mali is affecting security and its transition from a military junta back to democracy.
What we see in the case of Mali is that pro-Russian content tied to Russia emerged around the time that the junta made a case for extending the transition, and they later on made a case for bringing in Wagner. In terms of Wagner, what we've seen is that it's made things worse on virtually all indicators.
Another analyst told VOA that Wagner has done nothing to improve the situation in Mali and is most interested in disrupting French policy efforts. Meanwhile, people like Pascal Dima are cashing in. He crisscrosses Ouagadougou on his motorcycle, selling Russian flags to protesters.
I sell the flags at 1,000 francs each. People ask for them a lot. I have 350 flags that I share with a friend to sell. Today, this is the only one I have left, so I kept it for myself. I get them from a tailor for 800 francs each.
Although there are short-term gains for some, experts say it looks likely Russia will do more harm than good in finding a long-term solution to Burkina Faso's security problems. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso.
The long-awaited Rwanda genocide trial, Felicien Kabuga, continued for the second day this week. Kabuga, a former businessman and radio station owner, is one of the last suspects sought by a UN tribunal prosecuting crimes committed in the 1994 genocide, when ruling Hutu majority extremists killed more than 800,000 minority Tutsis and Hutu moderates in 100 days. Let's go live now to The Hague, where reporter Venust Shiyimana is standing by for us. Venust, thank you for joining us again today. Please update us on today's proceedings.
The first witness in the trial of Kabuga was heard today, giving his account on the role played by RTLM, Radio Télévision Libre de Mille Collines, the media that was used in 1994 to spread hatred and call for murder and violence against the Tutsi in Rwanda. The prosecution produced three evidences. The first one is a picture showing people who attended the crucial meeting on February 10th, 1994, where the accused, Kabuga, and the witness known as KB05 were present together with other few people who worked for the Ministry of Information. And the witness was asked to recognize some of them who were murdered during the genocide together with the minister. And the second evidence is a broadcast by RTLM journalist Habimana Kantano, mentioning names of people who were considered as enemies of the state. And the witness confirmed that following the call made live on RTLM, those people, especially two individuals, Zakaria and Gasheshero from Changugu, were murdered. And the third evidence produced by the prosecution was a song sung live by the same journalist, celebrating the extermination of the Tutsi. And the witness told the court that many other people, including women who sought refuge in the mosque in Kigali known as Gaddafi Mosque, were all killed following calls made on RTLM. And the prosecution requested that deposition made by a former official of the Ministry of Information be added to the prosecution case.
Venust, very quickly, the lawyers for Kabuga were also able to cross-examine a witness. Can you just summarize for us how that went?
Yes, the witness was first questioned on where he was in 1994 and how he found himself in the RPF-controlled area. The witness replied that he had been hiding in his neighborhood of Kakiru in Kigali, that he sought refuge in the Hotel de Mille Collines and later found himself in the controlled area by the RPF. But he told the court that he was fearing for his life if he ever found himself in the government-controlled area. But he was asked to confirm whether he was a member of the ruling party, and he said, yes, I'm a member of the RPF, but he didn't elaborate on whether Radio Muhabura of the RPF was also conveying any messages that could be seen inciting to violence.
Right, we'll catch up. Venust, thank you very much for your excellent reporting. Venust Shiyimana is reported live for us there, joining us from The Hague, Netherlands. Uganda's foreign minister says the East African country is committed to working with its neighbors to end conflicts to ensure peace and stability in the region. General Jeje Odongo spoke to VOA's Peter Clotty.
It is true for us in Uganda, we attach a lot of importance to peace and security and stability for the simple reason that many activities are impossible to undertake if there is no peace and security. And so we attach a lot of importance to this. The pain and suffering caused by war, resulting in immigration, disaster movement, disaster for refugees, are things that we take in very, very seriously, and we feel so emotional sometimes about them. This is why we take a lot of care to ensure that we get involved in activities that will engender peace and security in the region. Obviously, we cannot be able to do it alone, so we must be able to collaborate with our colleagues, with our neighbors, in a collective effort to bring about the desired results of peace and security in the region. We continue to pursue these approaches, both in South Sudan, in DRC, and in Somalia, in the hope that we will be able to bring peace in this region. We've been able to demonstrate that this approach is successful, and we would like to pursue it, and hopefully we will be able to get support from others in the regional efforts that we're involved in.
That was Uganda's Foreign Minister General Jeje Odongo speaking to VOA's Peter Cloddy. The Environmental Fund of Amazon founder Jeff Bezos plans to reverse deforestation and land degradation on around 250 million acres of land in Africa, according to the chief executive of the Bezos Earth Fund. Here's David Doyle with more.
One of the world's richest men, Jeff Bezos, is seeking to reverse deforestation and land degradation on around 250 million acres of land in Africa by 2030. That's according to Andrew Steer, chief executive of the Amazon founders Bezos Earth Fund, speaking during the Reuters Impact Conference on Tuesday.
Africa is a place where 60% of the soils have been degraded. And so by restoration, what we mean is a very simple idea. It is taking carbon up there in the atmosphere where it's causing a lot of trouble, is bringing it down to earth through the magic of photosynthesis into trees and bushes and crops and soils, where it brings, better incomes for farmers, better food security, more resilient soils, richer soils, healthier people, etc. I'm making it sound really great, and that's because it is great. And the good thing is there's now something called Africa 100, 100 million hectares of land in Africa to be brought back.
The initiative is led by African Union countries. The Bezos Earth Fund has pledged 30% of its $10 billion fund towards nature conservation, restoration and food systems transformation. The actual grants issued so far, a spokesperson said, total a little over $1.5 billion. Africa has contributed very little in terms of global greenhouse gas emissions, but the continent's countries are among the most vulnerable to its effects, as evidenced by recent floods and storms, as well as the Horn of Africa's worst drought in 4 decades. Developing countries have been increasingly demanding that wealthier, carbon-emitting nations pay reparations for climate-induced disasters.
Rich countries are going to have to play a bigger role on creating resilience, on helping poor countries and poor citizens to adapt.
Steer said that the Bezos Earth Fund is seeking to build a coalition of African and European countries around this year's UN Climate Summit, taking place in Egypt in November, to add heft to land restoration efforts.
That was David Doe of Reuters reporting. In other African news, Nigeria's military has secured the release of the remaining 23 hostages from a train attack by gunmen in northern Kaduna State in March, which saw dozens kidnapped and 6 others killed. The government blamed the attack on Islamist insurgency, Boko Haram. A month before Egypt hosts the United Nations Climate Change Conference, Egypt critics have questioned the choice of venue, pointing to Egypt's mixed record on the environment and on civil rights, with thousands of dissidents in jail, including Egyptian-British activist Alaa Abdel Fattah, who has been on a hunger strike for months. And Democratic Republic of Congo's government has rejected a request by U.S. climate envoy John Kerry to withdraw some of oil blocks put up for auction to protect forests. Congo's Environment Minister Yves Bazaiba told Reuters on Wednesday the move could undermine the country's development. South Africa, one of the continent's most industrialized nations, is facing the worst electricity blackouts in its history. One of South Africa's biggest industries, mining, and it's turning to solar power to keep operations running when power requirements fall short. Linda Giftash reports from Johannesburg.
Khanyisa, meaning let there be light. It's a phrase South Africans wish they could say as the country faces an energy crisis that's resulted in regular power cuts, called load shedding, of anywhere from 2 to 8 hours a day. For Goldfields South Deep Mine outside Johannesburg, it's meant the development of this solar plant couldn't be timelier.
From year one, we're saving 130 odd million rand a year on electricity. I think the other real benefit is business interruption that we're eliminating. So where we've been impacted by load curtailment, we start getting a more reliable source of energy, which keeps our business continuity. And
experts say the energy crisis is the result of years of missteps and mismanagement at the monopolized national power utility, Eskom. Both new and aging coal plants are experiencing regular breakdowns, and Eskom has failed to significantly invest in other reliable technologies to meet the growing demands.
And I think a lot of what's happening in the country is a result of some sort of reluctance to move decisively forward with building of solar and wind, simply because it means that other technologies are going to lose out.
Other technologies being coal, which the country also mines, as well as nuclear and, to a degree, natural gas. Rather than waiting for the country to resolve its conflicting energy interests, which are also muddied by politics, the mining sector is increasingly taking matters into its own hands.
They can no longer rely on Eskom as the sole supplier of electricity. And for this, there is more of a consensus to say that by 2025, at least 20 to 30% of the electricity that is being supplied to different mining houses, they have to be generating it by themselves using different forms of renewables.
Wind and solar account for just 7% of power generation nationally. Even without an energy crisis, Nwila said companies with mandates to reduce their carbon emissions are uneasy about the grid's reliance on coal. South Deep says its targets of net zero by 2050 was a major factor to install the 50-megawatt solar field and start planning a wind farm.
Decarbonisation is absolutely vital for our world. There's overwhelming evidence that if we don't address the carbon crisis in the world, we're driving the world to extinction. So we want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Experts say the rise of renewables among the economic heavyweight mining could steer the transition nationally for other industries and the grid, although it would result in major losses in customers and income for debt-ridden Eskom. Either way, a major shift in power generation won't happen overnight. Solar farms like this are not a one-size-fits-all solution, but companies say as South Africa's energy crisis gets worse, it makes sense not only for the environment, but financially too. Linda Giftash for VOA News, Johannesburg.
An app known as WirePay is up and running right here in the United States. The digital banking app was created by 2 Kenyans living here in the United States to empower immigrants in the U.S. underserved communities to access banking and other financial services. For more on this app, I'm joined here in the studio, my far left, by Hamston Maroria, co-founder and CEO of WirePay, and David Washira, the Chief Operating Officer at WirePay and a former World Bank specialist. Gentlemen, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to start with you, Hamston. What led to the creation of WirePay and when did it become fully operational?
Thank you so much. So we started WirePay as a model to enable different African immigrant communities who are often underserved, underbanked, and often overlooked by traditional and legacy banking channels. So we started this journey about 3 years ago, but majorly focused on the regulatory coverage. And we just launched last month, 16th of September. Currently on our internal launch, set to be rolling out the service fully to people 1st of November.
So, David, let me turn to you here. When it comes to money, everybody's concern is security. How secure is this app? Talk to us about the security of this app and the technological aspect of it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a big concern for us as well, security, particularly when you're sending money across borders. So we are fortunate enough to have partnered with IBM, and IBM has helped us provide world-class security when it comes to our app and how it interjects with the community at large. So we are under what we call the IBM Hyper Protect program, which is what powers our app.
Hamstone, many people are very familiar with the M-Pesa in Kenya, and it's widely used in East Africa. So how does WirePay compare to the likes of M-Pesa?
Yeah, so thank you. So I will say that WirePay is the M-Pesa of the African diaspora. So with Wire, users are able to open digital bank accounts. So here we're a very banked community here in the US. So we are able to offer checking accounts fully digitally that are opened within under 5 minutes. Users are able to link other banks, send money to each other just the same way that users will do with M-Pesa. So we want to bring the convenience of M-Pesa and merge it with banking here in the US, while also enabling immigrants to send money back home.
They can send money back home, so it doesn't really, it's not, just a US app. Anybody can upload this, David?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so no, currently it's actually just functioning here in the US, but we will be rolling out to the UK, the EU, Australia, and the Middle East as well later on next year.
How easy is it to install the app?
It's quite easy. You just go to the Google or Apple Play Store, which will be rolling out on November 1st. Download the app, enter your KYC details, your customer details as we call it. In about 2 to 3 minutes, you're done and you're fully set up.
So very quickly, Hamstone, what's the reason behind targeting the African immigrants or immigrants in general in the United States and the underserved community?
So number one, I would say that our purpose is to empower people. And for us, empowerment starts off with empowering our own. And for us, the African diaspora contribute immensely to the growth of the continent. But while they contribute over $50 billion in remittances going back to the continent, we believe that by giving them, more financial services like digital banking services, we will be able to even empower them even more to be able to access not only financial services here in the US, but also contribute positively to the, to the growth of our continent. So for us, as immigrants, as people that have lived and worked outside their home countries, we believe that, immigrants are a good focus group for us to be able to target. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, Hamstone. Yeah. Hamstone Maroria is co-founder and CEO of WirePay, and David Wachira, the Chief Operating Officer. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.